Hello and a very warm welcome. You are watching Race to Power. I am Molly Gambhir. We are starting off with the latest from the United States. We focus on Donald Trump's moves in Washington, D.C. and will he expand this to other parts of the United States? We take stock of where things stand right now and what could lie ahead. We're also getting you the latest on China's government suspending all ties with the Czech president over his recent meeting with the Dalai Lama. We get you all the details, this and more coming up. US President Donald Trump's special order to deploy special troops in Washington, D.C. has been met with mounting criticism. Trump took over federal police in the American capital under a special provision. But now political opponents and critics are asking, are other parts next? In fact, this comes as 800 troops started trickling into National Guard headquarters after Trump launched a bid to combat crime in the capital. Many from the blue camp, in fact, have labeled it as political theater. Some residents also feel the takeover is unnecessary. In fact, several leaders are now on edge after Trump named other cities, which he says have an alarming crime rate that need to be curtailed. And New York mayor has criticized the US president's takeover and warned that the police can take care of law and order without intervention from the White House.
We have the finest police department on the globe. People come here to be trained, and people speak with us to get assistance. And so, if the White House wants to help us in what we're doing to continue our success, and if we can help other cities, municipalities, they may want to ask us to come in and help other cities. We're willing to go into other cities and help them as well. But we don't need anyone to come in and take over. We got this under control.
Citizens are divided on the move. While many Trump supporters hailed the decision as an effort to lower crime rate, those opposed are accusing the US president of targeting cities led by African American elected officials. The allegation comes after Trump named Baltimore, Chicago, Los Angeles, New York and Oakland in his press conference, all of which have black mayors and a substantial population of people of color. And with us on the broadcast is Joanna LeBlanc, a political analyst, national security law analyst, and foreign relations expert with us from Washington, D.C. Thanks very much for giving us your time here. Let me begin by asking you for your perspective on what you see happening here, and if Donald Trump does expand this move to other parts, what would that look like?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's important to note that President Donald Trump is a president that is not afraid of utilizing his power, right? And that is something that we have not always witnessed with previous presidents. So the District of Columbia is unique in a sense that President Trump does have the legal authority to deploy National Guards to address issues in the event of a national emergency. President Donald Trump has indicated that the crime that is happening in D.C., very similar to what happens in places all around the world in terms of crime rates, amounts to a national security, amounts to an emergency rather. Therefore, he is able to deploy the National Guards. And also he's indicating that he will do the same thing in other states. However, he will run into some legal challenges because unlike DC, states have governors, states have mayors, and he can't just deploy the National Guard to those respective states. I do anticipate if that were to happen, those states will take legal actions against the president.
Right. What do you make of that very allegation that Donald Trump is specifically targeting a certain type of cities and parts? And do you sense that there is a larger message that the US president is trying to send out, in terms of the kind of moves that have been made so far?
I think the message the president is trying to send out is that, look, I will use my power, the power that has been invested in me by the Constitution. And I will also test my limits as the president of the United States. So it is on the governors and the respective mayors in cities across America to challenge the president's actions if needed. Now, are there violence in different cities across America? Certainly. The question is does it amount to a national emergency? And the president has said yes. The president has made the assessment, and he said there is a national crisis around the country. But I do think, though, and I think Mr. Trump knows this, he's definitely testing his limits in terms of what he can and cannot get away with. And I think a lot of us here, we're asking ourselves, wow, we really didn't know a president could exercise that much power. But I think the greater takeaway from this is that Mr. Trump will exercise his power, and he will check his limits and limitations as the president of the United States of America.
All right, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
And shifting focus for now, China's government has suspended all ties with the Czech president over his recent meeting with the Dalai Lama. Powell met with the Tibetan leader to congratulate him on his 90th birthday during his private trip to India. And according to a statement by a Chinese foreign ministry spokesman released by the Chinese embassy in Prague, the meeting contravened the political commitment made by the Czech government to the Chinese government and harmed China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The office of the Czech president has not issued an immediate response to the announcement. While the presidency is mainly a ceremonial role, it remains a position of high prestige. China, however, continues to maintain its relations with the Czech government as a whole. President Powell met the Tibetan spiritual leader and other Tibetan leaders in Ladakh on his 90th birthday. And during the meeting, President Powell expressed his support for their Tibet cause. He said it is a basic human right to speak Tibetan language, practice religion, and preserve Tibetan culture. Since fleeing Chinese rule in Tibet in 1959, the Dalai Lama has lived in exile in the Himalayan town of Dharamshala. Beijing regards him as a separatist. And during his exile, he has built a thriving community that has preserved Tibetan culture and identity, becoming one of the world's most recognizable figures while guiding the Tibetan diaspora in their struggle for autonomy and resistance to China's rule over Tibet. Israel's war on Gaza has triggered a strong support for Palestinian statehood. Major Western powers have announced recognition to the state of Palestine. The same sentiment now seems to be echoing in New Zealand's parliament, where the opposition lawmakers are demanding the Prime Minister's government to slap sanctions on Israel and back statehood for Palestine. The Green Party leader asked the government MPs to show some spine and back her proposal. She was later asked by the Speaker to apologize for her remarks.
So, Mr. Speaker, I will reiterate my call for the government to pick up our unlawful occupation of Palestine sanctions bill and to sanction Israel for its war crimes. If we find 6 of 68 government MPs with a spine, we can stand on the right side of history.
That is completely unacceptable to make that statement. Withdraw it and apologise.
No.
Then leave the House for the rest of the week.
Happily.
Although there are no indications from the government side for sanctions on Israel, the country's Prime Minister is mulling the decision to recognize Palestinian statehood. He has also criticized Israeli government for its war in Gaza. And taking a direct dig at Netanyahu, the leader said he has lost the plot. Listen in.
I think what's happening in Gaza is utterly appalling. I think Netanyahu has gone way too far. I think he has lost the plot, and I think that what we're seeing overnight with the attack on Gaza City is utterly unacceptable, and that's what we have been calling for as an international community now for a long period of time. He is not listening to the international community, and that is unacceptable.
Remember, Australia, Canada, the UK and France have already announced recognition to Palestinian statehood. In fact, in total, 3/4 of UN members now support Palestinian statehood. In fact, despite the mounting global pressure, Netanyahu remains unfazed, it seems, and is moving ahead with his final push in Gaza City. The Israeli military has approved the main concept for an attack plan in the Gaza Strip. Last week, Netanyahu said he expects to complete the new Gaza offensive fairly quickly. South Korea's former First Lady Kim Keon-hee has been arrested over a range of charges, including stock manipulation and corruption. The arrest came hours after the Seoul Central District Court reviewed the prosecutor's arrest warrant request against the 52-year-old, further compounding her legal jeopardy with physical custody. The court granted the warrant, citing the risk of tampering with evidence. In fact, the charges against Kim include violations of capital market and financial investment laws, as well as political funds laws. She is also accused of interfering in the nomination process for the MPs in her husband and former President Yoon Suk-yeol's party, a violation of the election laws, allegedly. Last week, Kim underwent hours-long questioning by the prosecutors, who filed for her arrest warrant the following day. The controversy has long surrounded Kim with lingering questions about her alleged role in stock manipulation. A video filmed in 2022 allegedly showed her accepting a Dior handbag from a self-proclaimed fan that reignited public criticism. And Kim will be held in a solitary cell fitted with a small table, floor mattress, and basic amenities reportedly, with minor adjustments to her routine given her high-profile status. With the arrest, South Korea now has a former president and First Lady both behind bars, the first such case in the country's history. The arrest marks a dramatic fall for the ex-first couple after former President Yoon Suk-yeol's stunning martial law declaration on December 3rd, which saw fully armed soldiers deployed to the parliament, but was swiftly voted down by the opposition MPs. Yoon was impeached and removed from office in April over his martial law declaration, prompting the country to hold a snap election in June. He has been under arrest and in detention over his martial law declaration. Yoon, as president, vetoed 3 special investigation bills passed by the opposition-controlled parliament that sought to probe the allegations against Kim, with the last veto issued in late November. A week later, Yoon declared martial law.
좀 얘기한다면은 저도 빨리 끝날 거라고는 생각해요.
Anti-government protests have turned violent in Serbia, where supporters and opponents of the president are entangled in a street showdown. More than 9 months of the student-led protests now witnessing a rather dangerous escalation. The first incidents erupted in a town northwest of Belgrade. Video footage from the scene showing rival factions of protesters releasing firecrackers on each other. The simultaneous protests by pro and anti-government groups led to this fiery clash. The police said at least 16 police officers were injured. The scenes were similar in the capital, where various police officers came down on the streets in riot gear with shields and batons in the hand. Police officers were seen pushing back anti-government protesters. In the overnight protest, multiple people have reportedly been injured in different skirmishes. The protest began in November after a train station canopy collapsed, killing 16 people, sparking allegations of corruption in state infrastructure projects. And since then, hundreds of thousands have taken to the streets demanding early parliamentary elections. The president has refused to call an early vote, and his supporters have started organizing counter demonstrations, fanning fears of even greater violence in the country. Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te mobilized disaster response as the typhoon killed one person and injured 33 others across the island. The typhoon, however, is just the latest crisis for the president. The island has faced multiple tropical storms, U.S. tariffs, and divisive recall elections in recent weeks. And now the president is fighting an uphill battle, it seems, to restore his approval ratings. According to a poll conducted, Lai Ching-te's approval ratings have gone down to 28%. With 55% of the respondents dissatisfied with his performance, this slump comes 1.5 years into his 5-year-long presidential term. Lai Ching-te is facing one setback after another: the DPP's recall defeat, a new 20% US tariff on Taiwanese goods, mismanagement of the typhoon aftermath, and 5 straight months of negative cabinet ratings, reportedly. In fact, the figures showing Lai Ching-te's approval highest among those aged 60 and above. Among those under 40, approval has dropped to just 20%. Down 16 points from last year. On the economy front, opposition and business leaders saying the government failed to match lower tariff terms secured by South Korea and Japan. Only 32% of the respondents approve of his handling of the tariff situation with the US. And on the contentious second recall vote targeting 7 KMT lawmakers, only 24% support the move, while 58% oppose it. Taiwan is set to hold local body elections next year, with presidential elections slated to take place in 2028 amid rising military pressure from China. DPP and Lai Ching-te are eyeing a tough political journey ahead. For more on this, take a look at this report sent from Taipei.
Typhoon Podul slammed into eastern Taiwan this afternoon, pummeling Taitung County. The storm brought heavy rain, fierce winds, and towering waves across the region. I'm reporting from Taipei as this powerful storm creates widespread chaos. The typhoon has crippled transportation systems, with airlines cancelling flights. More than 300 flights were scrapped nationwide today alone. Taiwan Railway shut down all services.
Dramatic escalation of political tensions in Mali as former Prime Minister has been arrested. The arrest comes several months after he was dismissed for openly criticizing the country's ruling military junta. And according to his lawyer, he is being held over allegations of misappropriation of public funds. Based on findings from Mali's Auditor General, several of his former allies have also been detained reportedly. Maiga was once seen as a key civilian face of the transitional government after the second coup in 2021. He was once a leading figure of the movement that helped oust the former president. In fact, he was sacked in November 2024 after he publicly condemned the junta's failure to commit to a return to civilian rule. He also accused of political arrests and extrajudicial detentions. Maiga's arrest comes amid a sweeping crackdown on an alleged coup. And few days ago, the junta claimed to have foiled a plot. Maiga's arrest comes amid a sweeping crackdown on an alleged coup. And last month, the junta leader formally granted himself a 5-year presidential mandate. Under a new law, Goita will remain head of state until at least 2030, with no requirement for elections. General Goita may renew his term as many times as necessary, with the stated aim of maintaining stability and achieving peace in the country. Since coming to power, the military junta has continuously attacked freedom of speech, imprisoned numerous civil society leaders, and intensified human rights violations while conducting military operations. Mali continues to remain on edge. Its military faces rising scrutiny at home and abroad over its increasing authoritarianism, reportedly. For more on this, take a look at this report sent by our correspondent.
Mali's political drama continues, this time with Tuesday's arrest of her former Prime Minister, Chogo Kukala Mega, several months after he was dismissed for criticizing the country's ruling junta. Mega's trouble started in November 2024 when he criticized the military regime for postponing elections. He was dismissed from his role as Prime Minister. He, however, continued the criticism in the media. We recall earlier this month, another former Prime Minister, Moussa Mara, was imprisoned after tweeting his support for jailed critics of the ruling military junta. With all political parties dissolved in May and General Assimi Goita's endless time in power, Mali's junta continues to tighten its grip. These actions, analysts say, signals a total silence of any iota of democratic tenets, as there appears to be no light at the end of the democratic tunnel in Mali. From Lagos, Nigeria, Louisa Olani, WION, World is One.
The Ecuadorian president led a march against the country's constitutional court, which recently suspended several security laws. Wearing a bulletproof vest and surrounded by bodyguards and several ministers, Noboa walked alongside hundreds of protesters towards the court in the center of the capital. And while critics call the march an attempt to curtail judicial independence, Noboa says the march was intended to preserve vital efforts to combat crime gangs and was part of his push to take on the once peaceful country's drug gangs.
We are here to seek justice and to seek peace. We are not here to run over anyone. We follow the mandate of the people, and the majority want results. The majority want peace. The majority want strong law enforcement forces that act against crime, and that the rights of people who do things right are always respected. Ecuador is changing. We will not allow anyone to stop us.
El Ecuador está cambiando.
Noboa's detractors say he is interfering with judicial independence and trying to pressure the judges to accept all his government's reforms. Noboa's National Democratic Action Party controls the legislature, where the 3 laws containing the provisions were approved in June. But last week, the Constitutional Court temporarily suspended 3 laws and promised to investigate warnings that the measures could be unconstitutional. Let's take a look at some other updates that are making headlines. Former Bolivian President Morales, who has been barred from contesting Sunday's general election, has warned that his supporters will take to the streets if the right returns to power after 20 years. And according to the polls, 2 right-wing heavyweights are locked in a close race. In fact, Morales earlier asked his supporters to spoil the ballots. With the latest threat, he is willing to take the fight on the streets. And this could lead to political unrest similar to that of 2019. Jailed former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak has won a major court battle, taking him a step closer to serving his corruption sentence under house arrest. Najib is imprisoned since August 2022, remember. He secured a judicial review to force authorities to confirm and execute a royal order allowing the move. The Myanmar military chief has called for heightened security ahead of the election. Security for the political party members and candidates is being increased. This comes as the newly formed interim government proceeds with a planned election in December and January. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Race to Power. This is me, Molly Gambhir, signing off. Thanks very much for watching.
India's Global Voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one. From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Hello there, welcome back. This is WION World is One. We are glad you're watching. Time now for Fine Print. I'm Eric Njoka, the headlines. French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz asserted that only Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky can negotiate a land deal with Russia in an effort to end Moscow's war against his country. EU's von der Leyen says that Europe, the United States and NATO have strengthened the common ground for Ukraine and are united to end the war. The United Nations Refugee Agency says at least 20 migrants died after a boat overturned in the Mediterranean, with many more still missing. The Israeli military approves the framework for a new offensive in the Gaza Strip as Hamas condemns what it calls aggressive Israeli ground incursions in Gaza City. Labour Member of Parliament Tulip Siddiq calls her anti-corruption trial a farce. As proceedings begin in Bangladesh, she is accused of illegally receiving a plot of land outside the capital of Bangladesh. Russia announces curbs on calls on the WhatsApp and Telegram messenger apps, saying that this was necessary to fight criminality. Typhoon Podul pounds Taiwan, shutting down businesses in the south, grounding flights and knocking out power for tens of thousands of households, while parts of mainland China makes preparations for the storm to make landfall. Negotiators from 184 countries remained split on how to curb plastic pollution less than 36 hours before they were slated to deliver a binding global treaty. The IOA gives the go-ahead to India's bid for the 2030 Commonwealth Games. The country's Olympic body see the CWG as a stepping stone for India in its plan to host the 2036 Olympics. A violent shift in the battle map is electrifying the run-up to the make-or-break Trump-Putin summit. In the past 72 hours, Russian forces have smashed through Ukrainian defenses across Donetsk and the Eastern Front, triggering a chaotic withdrawal from Kyiv's battered brigades. With the world's eyes locked on Alaska and diplomatic scripts being drafted behind closed doors, Moscow is racing to gain maximum advantage.
Russian troops have punched deep into eastern Ukraine, breaking through defensive lines that had held for months. Small infiltration batch of soldiers punching through, targeting gaps and seizing territory that Ukraine can scarce afford to lose. Ukrainian forces, outgunned and running dangerously low on fresh reserves, are forced to abandon months-long positions, losing hard-fought gains in mere days. Each kilometer yielded deepens the psychological wound in Kiev and supercharges Russian morale.
In general, the intensity of hostilities has increased, and maybe this indicates that the war is coming to an end, and maybe they will agree on something during the peace talks, and this will be their argument that they have seized the territories and will remain on them. I think that is why they have become so active now.
Kiev is also urgently ordering civilians to evacuate from towns and villages under threat.
It's been 3 days since they started shelling us so heavily. It was normal before, we were sitting there, it was quiet. Well, there were drones flying around, they shot them down, and nothing happened. Something here and there. But now, for 3 days in a row, they've been shelling us heavily.
Russia's battlefield advances coming as President Trump gears up to host his Russian counterpart in Alaska on Friday. Zelensky and his Ukrainian allies are pressing the US president not to go soft on Moscow. For Ukraine, the writing on the wall is clear. If a peace deal is not brokered, if concessions are not made, then Russia will continue to march forward. And the cost of stopping them will be far higher. Bureau Report, WION The World is One.
European leaders are gathered in Berlin to show support and discuss Ukraine's interests ahead of US President Donald Trump's meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. European leaders, along with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, held an online meeting with US President Donald Trump. Zelensky and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz gave their statement after their call with Trump. Both leaders say that include Zelensky in your talks. Merz says Europeans are doing everything they can to help set the agenda. Merz stressed that a legal recognition of Russian ownership of Ukraine cannot happen. He added that Ukraine must be at the table following the Trump-Putin summit. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron says only Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky